So throughout today's episode, we've been talking about a strategy that we call attacking your opponent's plan. And I just want to be really clear. I'm saying that when you are outnumbered, outmanned, outgunned, that the strategy is not to attack your opponent's forces, but to attack their plan, their strategy. That's the way you can actually make progress towards your objective. And specifically, we've talked about how to paralyze the opponent or adversary by freezing them and making them unable to move by your acts of maneuver and maneuverability. Also, secondly, by bypassing them, simply going around whatever obstacles they've either put in your way or benefit from structurally. And then lastly, undermining your adversary in a variety of different ways that go from resistance to sabotage to passive aggression, if you'll put it that way. And these notions of paralyzing, bypassing, and undermining are all ways that you can attack your opponent's plan and thereby change the game of power in civic life. Well, every episode, we always entertain some questions that come from you, our viewers, over social media. And so I want to spend some time here with 2 or 3 questions. And the first one here comes from Michael on Facebook. Is civic power limited to efforts to affect government policy? Super important question. Really glad it was asked. The answer is no. I'm not talking only about trying to get legislative bodies or executive branches to do one thing or another. That is a big part of civic life and civic power. But think of everything else that surrounds it. Think about how social norms change, about how attitudes on guns or gay marriage or whatever it might be begin to shift. That these things happen outside of politics and government. And the work of civic power in motivating and mobilizing people and ideas and social norms is about creating the context within which what we think is possible in society unfolds. Only some of that actually is about laws. A lot more of that is about norms and about attitudes and behaviors which become contagious over time. So I think when we become literate in civic power and think about something even specifically like attacking your opponent's plan, your opponent does not have to be in office or a formal party. Your opponent can be people who believe that we ought to be turning away immigrants. Or your opponent can be people who believe something about whether America is truly a white Christian nation or not. That attitudes and beliefs can be a thing outside of law and government that you move to try to affect as well. The next question comes also from Facebook, from Rebecca. How do we make sure that encouraging and fostering civic and people power remains peaceful and productive, not violent and destructive? And here I think it's important to say, at least on our show, we advocate nonviolent civic power. That said, the spectrum of what counts as nonviolent is pretty wide. I'm all for things that are not violent and destructive, but we live in an age of absolute bottom-up disruption. And disruption is not always polite. Disruption is not always neat. Disruption does not always occur within the confines of what people think ought to be normal politics. And across the left and the right, from Trump to Sanders, from the upending of politics in the city of Seattle, you see examples of this right now. And the reality is that if you want to make change and be, again, fluent in how to mobilize different forms of power, you've got to be willing to push the boundaries of what people think is polite and acceptable. If you think about the civil rights movement in the United States, some of the strategies and tactics were always polite, they were always peaceful, and yet they were deeply disturbing and disruptive to those in power with the status quo. And I think holding in mind both these things, that you can be peaceful and nonviolent, but also deeply, fundamentally, in ways that can freak people out, challenging the status quo, this is the way of civic power. Third and final question comes from Melissa, also via Facebook. Our public education system leaves so many uninspired, and those who can buy out often do, solving the problem for their children but not others. How can civic power affect this? You know, in some ways, this is a K-12 education question, and this is, I should say, a question that is far beyond just what we were discussing earlier in our conversation about Washington's paramount duty and so forth. The same question of how do you get people to think outside of just, I'm going to take care of myself, I'm going to take care of my own, I'm going to opt out. I think there are 2 layers to this. Number 1 is the layer of narrative. We've got to, on public education, remind folks that when we have a fully funded, robust public education in the system, it's better for everybody, and that it is worth your time and your effort to lean in and participate in trying to make that system better. Participate as an activist, participate as a parent, participate as a neighbor of the schools, that we own these schools whether or not we have children in the schools, because they are the engines of the future of our state. But then even beyond that narrative, I think, is a simple face-to-face fact of organizing and activating civic power. That if you are a parent, for instance, in a school that is maybe on the bubble between not so good and potentially good, that you've got to find other parents and say, let's lock arms. Let's together go into this school. Let's together send our kids to this school. Let's together make time to make this school stronger, to hold teachers and principals to account, to create a more robust PTA. That kind of peer-to-peer commitment is key not only to revitalizing our public education system, it is key to exercising civic power on any kind of issue. Looking our neighbors in the eye, saying we're not alone in this, we're not going to let a divide and conquer, every man for himself mindset take over, that we're going to say we are committing to mutuality. We are committing together to change a thing together. And we know it's going to be hard, but we know that when we do it together, we can actually move the ball and change the game. I think that's true in education. I think that's true on so many issues, and that's a matter of mindset as much as it is of tactics and skill. Well, we hope that you'll continue to be in conversation with us, and you can always send us more questions for this social media segment via Facebook or Twitter. Here's our hashtag. And also you can contact us directly by email at contact@seattlechannel.org. And friends, that wraps up this episode of Citizen University TV. We hope you'll think hard about how you can change the game of power in civic life by, again, identifying your adversaries and opponents and trying not to go toe-to-toe with them in terms of forces, but thinking about how you can attack their plan and strategy. And doing that, you can make change happen in every arena of civic life. Thanks for watching. I'm Eric Liu.